Welcome to the Titans of Industry Show. I'm very excited to have a returning guest, Rob Kirby, with us, KirbyAnalytics.com. For those of you who do not know Rob Kirby, who has extensive experience in everything that has to do from institutional to the retail side, I'd love for Rob to take just a couple of minutes and tell us everything about his background in a nutshell, because he has seen the world of finance and monetary systems from all angles, and that's very interesting going into what I'm going to ask Rob today. So, Rob, thank you very much for joining us, and can you please elaborate in a couple of minutes about a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. Pleasure to be with you again, Leor. From the standpoint of background, I got my university education at York University in Toronto. I did an undergraduate degree in economics. When I left York University, I went to work on Bay Street in Canada, which is the sort of the Canadian equivalent to Wall Street, where I worked for an international private brokerage firm called Prebon, and we were brokers of foreign exchange and interest rate products, euro-dollar deposits. And in later years, we opened a bond desk, and we were brokers of US and Canadian government bonds, as well as provincial bonds. And my specialty areas were, for many years, interest rate derivatives, FRAs, future or forward rate agreements, and interest rate swaps, along with euro-dollar deposits, and then a substantial amount of time in the sovereign bond markets. When I left the institutional side of the business, I went to work as an investment advisor, first for Scotia McLeod, the retail investment brokerage firm of Bank of Nova Scotia. And subsequent to that, I went to work for Investors Group in Canada, which is the largest mutual fund sales and originating firm in Canada. And now I write about the markets. And so that's sort of my background, and it's sort of varied and pretty, I would say, more or less all-encompassing in the capital markets.
Yeah, definitely.
That's my background.
Definitely. Rob, I want to ask you, first of all, if you've ever seen in your career something like what happened before the Fed announced the open-ended QE, the panic, what happened with stocks, bonds, and everything that we saw in the days that of the circuit breakers. Have you ever seen anything like it?
No, I've never seen the orgy of money printing that we're experiencing today. But as we discussed in the pre-interview, the orgy of money printing is not surprising to me, and it's a very natural follow-on, really, to what I've been writing about and saying now since back in the fall, when the Fed engaged in very, very unprecedented which was to satisfy insatiable money growth, which is required. And I've been saying this for more than 6 months now, that we have transited from a shallow money growth curve, and it's a phenomena that's referred to as a transit from basically linear growth to exponential growth in money, which is mandated by compound interest in any fiat money regime. Growth begins on a fiat money regime at a very shallow slope upward to the right, and then it inflects and it performs a function called hockey stick, where growth transits from linear and shallow to exponential and straight up. And the growth that money is on currently, as in the US dollar, is very similar to the growth, because in terms of the virus is growing at a compounding rate where it doubles, the number of virus cases doubles roughly every 2 or 3 days, or maybe it's 4 or 5 days. but it's every number of days, the total virus count doubles. And that's an exponential growth model. And the US dollar as a fiat money regime with compound interest, it also at a point inflects, and it has inflected, and it's growing at an exponential rate. So, I mean, I was saying it last fall that the amount of dollars in the system has to grow exponentially. And what we were missing last fall, I mean, absent the uh, uh, resounding amount of money that was being shoveled into the system via the repo route, we needed more. And the crazy thing is, we're going to need more yet, which is why you've seen the Federal Reserve open up swap lines with countries that they've never had swap lines with before. On the 19th of March, they created new swap lines to the tune of another $500 billion with another 9 countries outside of the initial 6 that they had in the previous financial crisis back in 2008 and 9. And the reason that this is happening is because we need this dollar machine, which requires infinite exponential money growth. It's going to continue to need more and more and more money. And just as the number of coronavirus cases is growing at an exponential rate, the amount of dollars that need to be in the system is growing at an exponential rate. And last fall, we did not have let's just say, a socially acceptable reason for the money to grow the way it had to grow. Well, when you introduce a global pandemic, suddenly the global population is receptive to the notion that money's going to be created at an exponential rate, because people right now are sitting at home and they want to get paid, and they're being paid. For the most part, they're being paid anyway. And there are some unfortunate ones that are falling by the wayside because they aren't getting paid. But let's just say this: money growth is growing exponentially. It will continue to grow exponentially. And our keepers will invent and will bring to bear new and creative ways and reasons for them to create even more money still. So that's where our future's headed. And of course, where this ends, Lior, as you can well imagine, is hyperinflation, which is something that is now baked into the cake, and this will occur. And most of us, unless we're taken down by the virus, are going to live to see it. So that's sort of my elevator speech as to where we're going, and we can get into details if you so wish.
Rob, I do wish. I want to ask you, this is very different than the stimulus we saw in 2008. In 2008, we did see zero interest rates. We did see QE, much smaller QE, and we didn't see any fiscal response. Now we see helicopter money. We see small business loans, and the amounts that we're talking about are much, much bigger than 2008. But I think the biggest difference for me is that this is not only monetary stimulus, this is also fiscal stimulus. We see a lot of government programs being enacted, and then now there's also a proposed $2 trillion infrastructure program.
Well,
How is that going to be different in terms of the result from 2008? Because in 2008 and then the years after that, we saw that the money did not trickle down to Main Street that quickly, and now it is straight going to Main Street. How is that going to be different?
Well, things are different today in that, Lior, if you follow the work of Catherine Austin Fitts and Dr. Mark Skidmore of Michigan State University and his team of PhD research students under him, you might be aware that there's a case of a missing 21 trillion that disappeared largely from the Department of Defense's financial books over the years 1998 to 2015. Now, this is money that was created out of thin air, that appeared in DoD and HUD's Housing and Urban Development's books but then disappeared into the ether. And where this money disappeared to, I would contend, is an adjunct of the U.S. Treasury called the Exchange Stabilization Fund, which is basically a catch-all fund that's engaged in all kinds of stuff that's out of sight of and beyond regulatory oversight of Congress, and it's operated at the discretion of the Secretary of the Treasury of the United States, who works hand in glove with the Federal Reserve to put the resources of the Exchange Stabilization Fund to work. Well, over this period of 1998 to 2015, $21 trillion in undocumented, I call it dark money, disappeared, and it flowed into the books of the Exchange Stabilization Fund. I would have it, and this money has been being put to work over the years to keep this system from imploding on itself or collapsing on itself. And this further dovetails with my whole thesis that money growth has been growing vertically. And you see, that 21 trillion is very likely been exhausted, which has necessitated the creation of additional trillions. And I mean, how many trillions the Fed has actually committed to creating over the last 3 weeks alone, I've lost track of. I think I lost track at around 6.5 trillion that the Fed is committed to create over the last 3 weeks alone. So, and to answer your question, what's different today that didn't happen back in the 2008-9 time period? Well, there's a few things that are different. To begin with, they had a very generous, let's just say, reserve of dark money contained within the Exchange Stabilization Fund that they could put to work, and the part of the curve we were on, let's just say the requirement for money growth hadn't inflected to the point where they had chewed through the 21 trillion or the growing amount that became 21 trillion in missing money by 2015. They hadn't chewed through all that money yet, so that they still had reserves. Furthermore, back in the 2008-9 time period, the Fed only had swap arrangements with the British Bank of England, the Bank of Canada, the Swiss National Bank, the ECB, and the Bank of Japan. So they only had swap lines with 6 foreign central banks. They've expanded the roster of central banks that have swap lines by an additional 9 countries and added an additional $500 billion in foreign central bank swap lines, you see, because this is creation of yet more dollars. And they've announced, I mean, your number of fiscal packages which are all going to be funded with freshly created fiat American dollars. So I mean, like I said, I lost track at around 6.5 trillion in commitments that the Fed/Treasury has committed to in creation in fresh fiat money over the last 3 weeks. And what I want to impress upon people is that this isn't the end. If you think that this 6.5 trillion that's been committed in the last 3 weeks, if you think that's the end of the money creation, I'm going to suggest to you that's jacks for openers, because in another month to month and a half, they're going to have to create another round of new money, because you see, just like the way the coronavirus, the growth rate of coronavirus, unless we flatten the curve, it's growing at a compounding rate where, you know, the amount of cases doubles every 3 or 4 days. Well, the amount of money required, it basically doubles on a timeline too. So this money that's been committed to be created, you know, it will be consumed, and we will need more again and more again. and more again. You see, because we're like the people from the of the sound money discipline, the Mises people, they refer to this as a crack-up boom. And we are in a crack-up boom with money right now. We're in early stages of it where it's just starting to become visible. And, to keep people from recognizing the true state of despair we're in with money, this is why the powers that be have suppressed the price of gold using futures and promises of gold, which can't be met with real metal. This is why in the paper markets, gold and silver have been suppressed. But needless to say, these schemes to control the price of precious metal will fail, and they will fail in spades very soon, because the price of physical metal has basically detached itself now from the paper prices that are being imposed on us through false price discovery mechanisms called COMEX and the London Bullion Market Association, or LBMA. These prices have no bearing on how much availability there is of physical metal. And as infinite amounts of fiat money continue to be created, the demand for physical metal will make a mockery and the fraud that these paper price discovery mechanisms truly are. And you will see that these exchanges will ultimately close, because they're going to have to close, because the demand for physical metal in the world is insatiable, and the amount of physical metal is limited, and it's finite, and mines are closing and mints are closing because the people that operate the mines and the mints are getting sick with the virus, and that's going to curtail demand. But more so than the supply being curtailed, but more so than the supply being curtailed, it's the demand that's going to come from the infinite new supply of fiat money. Money is growing at an infinite pace and will continue to do so going forward.
Rob, I want to ask you, what would have happened if the Fed had not created any QE?
Oh, we would have had an absolute deflationary collapse. But they've clearly chosen that they're going to inflate.
Would that have been better?
Hyperinflation it is. Sorry, come again?
Would that have been a better choice?
Well, that might have been a better choice in 2008 or 9, but they showed then that they were very, very committed to basically creating dark money, as in 21 trillion in dark dollars that are off book, that they put to work, over the years 1998 to 2015 and beyond. So basically, the powers that be, Lior, have shown us that they're all in on the money printing. So money printing it will be, and I mean they're committed. They're more than committed. You see, Lior, the scale of duplicity that's occurred already in monetary ranks around the world, it's pretty much if you can, I'm going to use a metaphor here. If you could imagine somebody axe murdering 35 people and then finally saying, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I can't get away with this anymore. I'm gonna put my hand up now, and I'm gonna say, okay, you got me. I axe murdered 35 people, but I'm going straight now. Okay, so let's let bygones be bygones. I'm going straight now, and everything's gonna be like we're gonna be friends now. No, it doesn't work that way. You see, with what monetary officials have done to date, if they ever come clean, they're gonna hang from lampposts. Okay, just like an axe murderer, somebody who's murdered 35 people, who's a serial killer, can't say, I repent and I'm going to live my life normally now. It doesn't work that way. You're done. The jig is up. you've been caught, you've been outed, and this is our reality. You know, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't consider it bad news. I just consider it being the bearer of reality. This is life today. And you know what? We need to get used to it, because this is the spot we've been put in. And you know, there's no returning from here. We need to move forward, and the way we move forward is we need a return to sound money, or something approximating sound money. Commerce will never stop. Commerce will continue. You know, even if we go through a rough patch where commerce has to devolve back into something resembling barter, commerce will never stop. But what we do need to put an end to are these financial engineered outcomes, which are grossly unfair, which are grossly one-sided, that are overseen by a group of elitists who have basically carried on the mantra, of Keynes, John Maynard Keynes, many years ago, when he bestowed upon the world this Keynesian monetary claptrap, which by its very design was destined to fail. And Keynes was told that his system was destined to fail years ago. And his response to the criticism that his system was designed to fail, he told people, I don't really care if the system's designed to fail, because in the long run, we're all dead anyway. Well, you know, today, here we are, we're in the long run. The system has failed, and it's failing in spades in front of our eyes. And to keep this horrible, disgusting system alive, humanity has been inflicted with, and I would suggest absolutely intentionally, we've been treated to this pandemic, which in my view, and there's a lot of people way above my pay grade in the field of epidemiology, who make the sound arguments, at least in my books, that this pandemic, this virus, has been engineered in the lab. And my personal view is that not only was it engineered in the lab, but it was introduced to humanity on purpose, because the people that introduced it are the people behind the money scheme that we're currently being treated to globally. And they knew that it would create a global pandemic, which would necessitate a response of a global nature, which would basically be the okay or the wink to have unbridled, infinite money growth to respond to the global pandemic. And I'll just tell you something. I was saying we're going to have infinite money growth last fall on the heels of the repo operations that were unprecedented being put into motion, before we ever had any knowledge of a coming pandemic. And you see, unless it's just a coincidence that we were going to require infinite money growth, and it's a coincidence that we had a global pandemic, the likes of which we've never seen before. You see, I don't believe in coincidences. You see, I know that the money was required. And here we are, the money's being created at an infinite pace. And it's like the pandemic came along, right on schedule to basically, I'm going to say, to cow humanity into saying that the money creation is okay. I mean, if the Fed had tried to create $6.5 trillion of new money without a global pandemic, people would have lost their stuff. And the response would have been no way, not over our dead bodies. But it's amazing when you introduce a global pandemic. Suddenly, people are at home. They're locked down in their homes across the Western world, and they're saying, "Pay me," and they don't care how much money's being created. But I mean, this money that's being created, which is going to have to continue, and it's only going to become greater, the amounts that are being created, it's going to be our end anyway, because we're going to hyperinflate. And living through a hyperinflationary depression will be no more fun than living through a depression, or a deflationary collapse. But either way, the money's no good. And with the money being no good, best people examine very closely their holdings of monetary or alternatives to the current money regime. And whether that's gold, whether that's silver, whether it's barterable goods, I'm suggesting it's got to be real stuff. And there may be a space even for cryptos in the mix going forward. Basically, I think everybody needs to have a hard look at anything that poses or stands as a dollar alternative, a credible dollar alternative. And that's not going to be more debt and more fiat money.
Rob, I want to go back to what you said about the pandemic. Could you elaborate more about this? I've heard, obviously, from numerous sources, their theory about this originating in the lab in Wuhan. Could you talk to us about what you've learned?
Well, I mean, I've listened to the likes of Francis Boyle, who wrote the U.S. conventions on biowarfare, which were adopted by the UN as the UN Conventions on Biowarfare. And he is I would say, if anything, he's an expert researcher. And in his research, he has identified or suggested that the genesis of this virus, this coronavirus, he says that the genesis of it is Fort Detrick to University of North Carolina, and then it was sold by the University of North Carolina back in 2015 to the Chinese during the Barack Obama administration, and then additional work was performed in the Level 4 Biolab in Wuhan to further weaponize this virus. And he claims that for people who are of the epidemiological smarts and intelligence, it's claimed that the incision marks of HIV being inserted into this coronavirus, they leave. My understanding is that when HIV was inserted into this, basically by splicing genes of HIV into the coronavirus, it leaves what amounts to a scar. And supposedly, according to people far above my pay grade, that the scar of the incision of HIV into the coronavirus, it leaves a mark, much like if you've ever seen a photo of a woman who's had breast augmentation, there's a very discernible scar, which doesn't occur in nature. Women aren't born with scars on their breasts where they've been augmented. It's a procedure that people who have breast augmentation, there's a surgical procedure that's undertaken, and it leaves a scar. Well, supposedly, and epidemiology and pathogens are not my bailiwick, but I've listened to enough people who I think have the chops and know the trade. They say that it leaves a scar when you splice genes into or when genes are spliced into another organism, and these scar marks do not occur naturally and do not occur in the wild. So this is why this virus is identified as something that was created in a lab. So if you accept the notion that this was created in a lab, the real debate is whether it was released by accident or whether it was released on purpose. And given the coincidental nature of the money that I spoke of earlier, it would be extremely coincidental that this bioweapon, because it is a bioweapon, because it was created in a lab, as far as I'm concerned anyway. And I don't believe in the coincidence that as the world needed an influx of an infinite amount of dollars, and there was no good reason to create those dollars that people would ever accept, that this bioweapon just happened to come along at the opportune time to justify the creation of $6+ trillion to date, and it's going to be more going forward. And I mean, if you believe that the coincidence, that this just happened to fall out of the air at the time when this unprecedented amount of money was going to be required to keep the dollar system alive, then you believe in the tooth fairy, and you believe in Santa Claus, and you believe in the Easter Bunny. And I don't believe in any of those things.
Rob, very interesting stuff. Could you tell people where they can find more of your work, your articles, and about the offerings in Kirby Analytics?
Yeah, well, you can catch me on the web at kirbyanalytics.com. And, I think a little bit outside the box, and I don't really buy anyone's line of crap. I think for myself. I understand the shortcomings of fiat money. I especially understand the shortcomings of this Keynesian money regime that we've been living under. And all I can say to you, Lior, is why this whole thing hasn't failed previously is because we've been subject to, or humanity has been subject to, hijinks of a scary nature, with people performing, I'm just going to say, black magic with money. And money has been created off book for many years now that people have trouble wrapping their heads around. And the reason why people haven't been able to get their head around what's occurring in our monetary realm is because we are all conditioned as humans to understand and get our heads around linear growth. Exponential growth and linear growth are two completely different things. And you see, the coronavirus has introduced us to how damning and how rapidly debilitating exponential growth can be. And what people have trouble accepting is that our money is growing at an exponential rate and has to grow at an exponential rate, just the way the coronavirus is doubling, or every 3 or 4 days, which leads to crazy numbers that are being reported in terms of incidences of the virus. Well, our money's growing the same way. Our money is a virus, and our money's growing at a geometric rate, and people have trouble conceptualizing the notion that our money is growing or has to grow at that kind of rate, but it is. Anyway, kirbyanalytics.com is my spot on the net, and you can read stuff that I write, and I do a lot of interviews, and there's a lot of my stuff in the public domain.
Rob Kirby, thank you very, very much.
Been my pleasure, Leo.